This backwater planet was supposed to be a quick score, a simple grab, until I found myself staring down a quartet of laser sights, wielded by women whose eyes held the cold fire of rivals, and a challenge I couldn't resist. Xylos Delta. The name alone tasted like rust and cheap synthale. A glorified asteroid, bloated with the offal of 1,000 star systems, orbiting a dying red dwarf. It was a gravitational anomaly, a dumping ground, and, for a man like me, a treasure trove. My specialty, retrieving what others had, misplaced dash. Usually, that meant picking through orbital debris or forgotten derelicts. Today, it meant diving into the belly of the beast itself, the notorious Scrap Lord's Maw, a sprawling junkyard that swallowed ships whole and coughed up raw materials. Or, if you were lucky, forgotten secrets. The target was the Chronos Shard. Not a weapon, not even truly valuable in the traditional sense, but a piece of ancient, temporal tech, a historical curiosity, if the whispers were true. To the right collector, it was priceless. To me, it was a ticket off this rock and a fresh start. My ship, the Stardust Drifter Dash, a patchwork marvel of scavenged parts and dubious legality, was parked deep in a magnetic shadow, patiently waiting for my return. The maw itself was a nightmare of tangled metal, sparking conduits, and groaning hydraulics. Towers of compressed hulls rose like twisted monuments to galactic waste, casting long, distorted shadows under Xylos Delta's perpetually hazy sky. The air, thick with the smell of ozone, burnt plastic, and something vaguely organic, grated in my lungs. I moved like a ghost, a trained shadow, my enhanced optics cutting through the gloom, my internal monologue a cold, strategic calculation, entry, locate, extract, exfil. Simple, clean, until it never is. I navigated the treacherous terrain, scrambling over mountains of broken circuitry, rappelling down chasms of shattered plating. The Scrap Lords, a loosely organized gang of augmented heavy lifters and territorial junkies, usually ran this sector. They were predictable, slow. Their defenses were crude, relying on brute force and trip mines. My kind of easy money. My comms crackled. Entry point beta, 7 secured. No hostiles detected within a click. Proceeding to target coordinates. My own voice, filtered through my helmet's comm, sounded calm, detached. Years of this work had carved away any excess emotion. Just the job. I slipped through a ruptured hull, into the cavernous interior of what was once a deep space cruiser. The air within was still, thick with the metallic tang of decay. My target, according to my intel, was located within the ship's former navigation core. It was a good hiding spot, buried deep within the junked vessel, requiring intimate knowledge of the wreckage. Too good a hiding spot. Maybe. My gut churned with a familiar unease. Why haven't the Scrap Lords found it? Or claimed it? My cynicism, a well-honed survival tool, whispered a warning. I moved with silent efficiency, my multi-tool humming, slicing through rusted bulkheads, bypassing ancient security systems. The navigation core shimmered ahead, a collapsed chamber surrounded by glowing, fractured crystal displays. And then I saw it. The Chronos Shard. It pulsed with a faint, temporal glow, resting on a pedestal of salvaged alloy. It wasn't large, no bigger than my fist, but even from here, I could feel a faint, almost imperceptible hum radiating from it, a ripple in the fabric of time itself. Easy money, I thought, a rare smirk touching my lips. Too easy. My hand reached out, gloved fingers brushing against the cool, ancient artifact. Just as my fingers closed around it, a sharp, high-pitched whine cut through the silence. Not a Scrap Lord alarm. This was something else. Something precise. For crimson laser dots appeared on my chest, perfectly still, perfectly aimed. My hand froze, the shard still clutched in my grip. My internal monologue snapped from easy money to fight or flight. Damn it. Not alone. And these aren't Scrap Lords. Drop it. Spacer, a voice, cool and utterly devoid of fear, cut through the comms. It was female, and it was laced with an edge of quiet amusement. The shard isn't yours. I slowly raised my hands, my eyes scanning the shadows. My enhanced vision picked them out, subtly, expertly concealed among the debris. They weren't moving, just holding their positions, their weapons locked. They were good, too good. The first, stepping out from behind a collapsed support beam, was tall, lean, with short, raven hair and eyes like polished jade, sharp, intelligent, utterly unblinking. Her rifle, sleek and modified, rested easily in her hands. This was Valeria, the leader, I deduced, her posture radiating an understated authority. Always the dramatics, Valeria. Another voice, lighter, mocking, chimed in. She emerged from a pile of sparking circuitry, a lithe figure with fiery red hair and a wicked grin. Her weapon was smaller, a pair of custom energy pistols, twirling idly in her fingers. This was Kira, the tech specialist, I suspected, her gaze flitting across my gear, already assessing my capabilities. From a shadowed alcove, a third figure materialized, almost silently. Her skin was a deep, almost iridescent blue, and her movements were fluid, almost liquid, as if she were a part of the shadows themselves. Her face was framed by dark, braided hair, and her eyes, a startling amber, were unervingly still. She carried a vibro knife with a casual grace. This was, Sari, the stealth expert, her presence a chilling testament to her skill. And finally, from a jagged opening above, a fourth dropped, landing with a soft thud that belied her powerful frame. Her hair was a wild cascade of dark curls, and her movements were primal, muscular. Her weapon was a heavy-gauge slug thrower, its barrel gleaming ominously. Her face was etched with a raw, almost feral beauty, and her eyes, a piercing gray, held an unapologetic hunger for action. This was Zora, the combat specialist, her presence radiating a blunt, dangerous energy. The Nomad Queens. Their reputation was whispered across the outer rim. A ruthless, efficient crew, all female, who struck fast and vanished without a trace. They were ghost legends, and I had just stumbled into their lair. Chronos Shard, Valeria stated, her voice calm, direct. Release it. I weighed my options. For on one, armed, skilled, and with the element of surprise. My chances were slim, but I wasn't known for easy surrender. My mind raced, assessing the chamber, looking for environmental advantages, weak points. Now, ladies, I said, my voice deliberately calm, a slow smirk spreading across my lips, even as my internal monologue screamed. Play for time. Find an opening. Isn't this a bit aggressive? We could talk about this. Maybe split the profits. Kira snorted, her red hair bobbing. Split profits with a lone wolf? That's rich. We prefer to keep our cuts whole, spacer. Her gaze was sharp, dissecting, already looking for tells, for weakness. Sari remained silent, a statue of predatory stillness, her vibro knife gleaming. Zora's finger twitched on her trigger guard, her gray eyes narrowed, hungry for a fight. Valeria's jade eyes held mine. We don't negotiate with unknown variables. You picked the wrong target, human. Did I? I retorted, my smirk unwavering. Or did you just get outmaneuvered? I'm holding the shard, after all. I tightened my grip on the artifact. It pulsed faintly, a cold, almost imperceptible thrum against my palm. A temporary inconvenience, Valeria said, her voice still calm, but with an underlying steel. We've got you surrounded, and we're not known for our patience. My internal monologue was a frantic calculation. They want the shard. They're good, but they're also overconfident. They underestimate a lone wolf. This was not just about the artifact anymore. It was about the challenge. The sheer exhilaration of matching wits with opponents who were clearly my intellectual and tactical equals, if not superiors in sheer numbers. The allure was intoxicating, a dangerous thrill that ignited a spark in my cynical soul. Perhaps, I drawled, my voice laced with a subtle challenge. But the best hunters know when to cut their losses, or when to set a bigger trap. My eyes flickered to a stack of unstable durasteel plating near Zora's position. Old, rusted, barely held together. My multi-tool still hummed, quietly, unobtrusively, at my hip. Kira, sharp as she was, noticed the direction of my gaze. Her eyes widened, a flicker of understanding. He's planning something, she warned, her voice losing its playful edge. Too late, I whispered, and with a lightning-fast movement, I released the Chronos shard, letting it clatter to the ground, but simultaneously activated a sonic burst from my gauntlet, a custom-built, non-lethal deterrent. The high-pitched shriek ripped through the air, disorienting, designed to buy me seconds. The Nomad queens, highly trained as they were, flinched, their laser sights momentarily scattering. Zora, her hearing more acute, roared in discomfort, instinctively raising her slug thrower to cover her ears. That was my window. I didn't run towards an exit. I lunged at the durasteel plating near Zora, slamming my shoulder into the unstable stack. With a deafening groan, the rusted metal buckled, collapsing inward, sending a cascade of debris raining down, partially burying Zora and creating a chaotic wall between us. "Move!" Valeria barked, her voice sharp with renewed urgency, as Kira dodged flying shrapnel and Sari melted back into the shadows. I didn't stop. I spun, rolling under a dangling power cable, and scrambled into a narrow, unlit service tunnel, leaving the Chronos shard, still glowing faintly on the ground, in the midst of their disarray. It was a calculated retreat, a strategic withdrawal. The shard was secondary to survival. For now, my comms crackled with Valeria's voice, now sharper, colder. "You won't get far, Spacer. That shard is ours. Finders keepers, ladies." I retorted, my voice laced with a triumphant, adrenaline-fueled laugh as I vanished into the darkness of the tunnel. "Unless, of course, you're not fast enough." My internal monologue hummed with satisfaction. "They're good. Damn good. But I'm better." And a new, exhilarating game had just begun. The challenge was set. My life, my freedom, and perhaps a deeper understanding of these formidable women were now on the line. The tension was thrilling, the rivalry intoxicating. Xylos Delta had just become a lot more interesting. Hashtag the Nomad's Gambit. Part 1. Calculated collision. My escape through the service tunnels was a blind dash, guided by instinct and the faint hum of distant machinery. The dust and debris from my little demolition job still hung heavy in the air behind me, masking my trail. My heart hammered, not from fear, but from the exhilarating rush of the encounter. They were everything the legends said: fast, coordinated, lethal. And that made the chase all the more thrilling. "They'll pursue," my mind raced, analyzing their capabilities. Valeria's strategic. Kira's tech will be trying to track my biosignatures. Sari's already ghosting. Zora, she'll just want to smash something. I grinned, a feral satisfaction. Good. A predictable enemy is an exploitable enemy. I emerged into a vast, cavernous section of the junkyard, a graveyard of colossal, derelict transports, their hulls split open like grotesque, decaying leviathans. This was a sector known for its unstable gravitational pockets and unpredictable shifts in atmospheric pressure. A perfect hunting ground, or a perfect trap. I set up a few quick, crude trip mines salvaged from my emergency kit, linking them to a sonic emitter. Not to kill, just to disorient. A little personal greeting. I needed time. Time to assess. Time to plan. My comms buzzed, a new frequency. "This is Kira. You're predictable, Spacer. Your little dust cloud won't last forever." Her voice was a low hum, steady, analytical. And that sonic trick? Amusing, but easily countered. "Oh, I'm just getting warmed up, Kira," I replied, my voice light, confident. "Thought you'd enjoy the challenge. It gets lonely out here, without a proper sparring partner." A beat of silence. Then Valeria's voice, colder, sharper. "We are not sparring partners, human. We are the Nomad Queens. And that shard is ours." "Funny," I retorted, ducking behind a collapsed wing assembly. I seem to recall it being in my hand last. Possession is 9/10 of the law, even on a rock like this. "The law means nothing here," Zora's growl rumbled through the comms, closer than I liked. "Only strength. And we have it in spades. Surrender, or be broken." Bold words. "Muscle," I said, a faint smirk touching my lips. "But breaking me is harder than it looks. Besides, wouldn't that just be a waste? I can be useful. A temporary asset. Think of it as independent contractor work." The silence that followed was palpable. They were weighing the offer. They were good at what they did, But a lone, resourceful expert could be a valuable, if unreliable, addition to a high-stakes grab, especially one who'd already proven capable of escaping their initial ambush. Don't give them too much credit, my internal monologue cautioned. They're predators, always looking for an advantage. This isn't trust. This is a cold, calculated risk. We don't contract with unknowns, Valeria finally stated, her voice returning to its calm, strategic tone, especially not with lone wolves who bite. And you don't break experts without collateral damage, I countered, already anticipating her next move. Or have you forgotten the Chronos shard? Still very much on the table, still very much unguarded. My comms then picked up a new, unsettling frequency. Not theirs. A different signal. A low, rhythmic pulse, growing louder. My enhanced optics zoomed in on a distant, impossibly large craft, its profile sleek, predatory, unlike anything native to Xylos Delta's typical junkers. Its energy signatures were immense. Syndicate. The thought was a cold, hard knot in my gut. These weren't scrap lords. This was serious. The Syndicate, an interstellar crime cartel, was known for its brutal efficiency and absolute disdain for independent operators. They didn't negotiate. They simply took. Or destroyed. Looks like we have bigger problems, ladies. I cut into their comms, my voice losing its playful edge, replaced by a grim urgency. That's a Syndicate heavy hauler. And they don't send heavy haulers for a simple salvage operation. A tense silence from their end. They would be seeing it too, their advanced sensors picking up the same damning data. They're not here for the shard, Kira's voice, surprisingly serious, broke the quiet. They're here to clean house. To wipe out all independent operations on the Ma. Looks like your claim on the shard just got a whole lot more complicated, I said, a wry grin touching my lips. And suddenly, a temporary alliance doesn't sound so bad, does it? Valeria's voice was tight, filled with frustration. You would propose an alliance with the very people you just tried to outwit? Necessity, my dear Valeria, I replied, my gaze fixed on the rapidly approaching Syndicate vessel. Makes for strange bedfellows. We both want the shard. They want to eliminate us. Common enemy, common goal. What's not to like? A long, agonizing pause. I could almost hear the rapid-fire calculations in Valeria's mind, the tactical assessments, the pros and cons. No betrayals, Valeria finally said, her voice sharp, absolute. No lone wolf gambits that endanger the collective. Agreed. My word is my bond, Valeria. I lied smoothly, my internal monologue already devising counter-betrayal strategies. My word is my bond, until it's not. Survival first. Always. For the duration of this collaborative effort. After that, all bets are off. Agreed, she conceded. The word clipped. We meet at Sector Gamma 9, the old processing hub. And don't try anything clever, human. We'll be watching your every move. Wouldn't dream of it, I purred, already moving, my comm snapping off. The temporary alliance. The reluctant cooperation. The thrilling, dangerous game had just shifted. And the Nomad Queens, these formidable, beautiful rivals, were now my uneasy, albeit lethal, allies. This was going to be fun. And incredibly, terrifyingly, dangerous. The blur between adversary and ally had begun to form. Hashtag the Nomad's Gambit. Part 2. Unholy Union. The rendezvous point, Sector Gamma 9, was a skeletal remains of a processing plant, its colossal machinery rusted into grotesque abstract sculptures, casting long, distorted shadows under the murky sky. The air here was even thicker with dust and the acrid scent of decaying metals. The Syndicate heavy hauler was a menacing presence in the distance, a dark predator circling its prey. I arrived first, moving with caution, setting up a few quick sensors, just in case. They were good, but I was paranoid. Survival had taught me that. They materialized out of the shadows, not walking, but seeming to simply appear. Valeria, Kira, Sari, and Zora. They moved with that same unnerving unity, their gear bristling, their eyes sharp, assessing. There was no greeting, no pleasantries, just a cold, professional acknowledgement of our shared predicament. Valeria's jade eyes, sharp as ever, swept over me, then the surrounding terrain. Report, she commanded, her voice devoid of emotion. Syndicate vessel is establishing a perimeter. Standard sweep pattern, but they're bringing up heavy ground units. Looks like they mean to scour the entire sector. Thorough. I kept my voice calm, analytical, meeting her gaze evenly. They're not just after the shard. They're eliminating competition. Us. Kira, ever the pragmatist, nodded. Their tactical data matches our own. They'll be deploying ground drones soon. And human-level enforcers. Well-armed. Well-trained. Her eyes, flitting over my salvaged gear, held a hint of grudging respect. So the plan. Zora growled, her hand resting on her slug thrower, her eyes already scanning for targets. The thrill of battle was etched on her face. Valeria turned to me, her gaze piercing. You proposed this alliance, human. What's your gambit? My internal monologue was a quick calculation. Show them just enough. Prove my worth, but keep my cards close. The syndicate operates on efficiency and overwhelming force. I began, gesturing to the ruins around us. They won't expect cunning. We hit them where they're weakest, and we hit them hard. I quickly laid out a provisional plan, sketching diagrams in the dust with my boot. Diversionary charges here to draw their drones. Sorry, your stealth capabilities are crucial for infiltration. You slip through their perimeter, disable their comms. Kira, once their comms are down, you remotely override their ground sensors, create blind spots. Zora, you're the hammer. You exploit those blind spots, create chaos, draw their enforcers. And Valeria, I met her gaze. You're the strategist. You coordinate the symphony. My role? I'm the wild card. The distraction. The ghost in the machine. Valeria listened, her face unreadable, her jade eyes fixed on mine. Kalen, her general, stood silently behind her, arms crossed. Risky, Valeria finally said. Too many variables. Too much reliance on an unknown. Her gaze lingered on my face. Or, I countered, a challenging smirk touching my lips. Just enough variables to make it unpredictable for them dash. And I'm not unknown. You've seen what I can do. You know I can survive. My words were laced with a subtle challenge, an invitation to a dangerous game of wits. Kira chuckled, a low, appreciative sound. He's got a point. Their algorithms won't account for a solo actor with a penchant for mayhem. Sorry, ever silent, merely gave a fractional nod. Zora grunted, a sound of grudging approval. Valeria's gaze remained on me for a long moment, a silent assessment. Very well. We proceed. But any deviation, any hint of betrayal, and this alliance ends with your demise. Understood. Her voice was cold, absolute. Crystal clear, Nomad Queen. I replied, my smirk unwavering. Now let's go make some noise. The next few hours were a tense dance of preparation. I worked alongside them, sharing my limited explosives, my knowledge of scrap Lord Junker anatomy. I watched them, truly watched them, in action. Kira, hunched over a jury-rigged console, her fiery hair obscuring her face, worked with a furious, almost mesmerizing intensity. Her fingers danced across alien interfaces, bypassing encryption, deciphering complex data streams. She was a genius, a whirlwind of pure intellect, solving problems with an elegant simplicity that left me impressed. When a complex syndicate firewall baffled me, she simply snorted, muttered something about primitive encryption, and bypassed it with a few taps, a triumphant gleam in her violet eyes. Sorry, a phantom in the shadows, moved with an unnerving grace. She scouted the perimeter, her iridescent blue skin blending seamlessly with the gloom. She could slip through cracks I couldn't even see, her movements so quiet, so efficient, she was like a living whisper. She communicated in gestures, in subtle shifts of posture, in a shared understanding that bypassed words. I caught her watching me sometimes, her amber eyes unreadable, but I felt no malice, only that same detached, assessing curiosity. Zora was a force of nature. She moved with a raw, almost animalistic power, her heavy slug thrower looking like an extension of her own formidable arm. She enjoyed the brutal efficiency of her task, her gray eyes alight with a dangerous glee as she planned routes of attack, identified choke points, and strategized for maximum destruction. There was a directness to her, A brutal honesty that was almost refreshing after years of navigating the nuanced deceptions of the underworld. And Valeria. She was the heart of the operation, the conductor of this dangerous symphony. Her orders were calm, precise, delivered with an authority that none questioned. She anticipated every contingency, adapted to every shift, her mind working at 1,000 miles an hour. She was ruthless, yes, but undeniably effective. And watching her, seeing her sharp intellect in action, a new kind of allure bloomed within me. It wasn't traditional seduction. It was the exhilarating pull of a dangerous equal, the compelling chemistry of two sharp minds engaged in a high-stakes game. We moved as a unit, a strange, uneasy alliance of predator and rogue. My cynicism remained, a constant guard. I watched them for signs of betrayal, for a double cross. But they watched me with equal intensity. The air was thick with suspicion, but also with a grudging respect that grew with every successful maneuver. We were all survivors, all predators in our own right, and in this brutal environment, competence earned respect, even from rivals. My internal monologue, usually a fortress of cynical self-preservation, began to admit new complexities. These weren't just rivals. They were formidable, and in their own ruthless way, admirable. Their independent spirit, their loyalty to each other, their unyielding drive, it was something I hadn't encountered in a long time. It was a dangerous thrill, this dance with adversaries who were as captivating as they were deadly. And the prize, the Chrono Shard, was beginning to feel secondary to the game itself. The stakes were rising, and the lines were blurring. ####The Nomad's Gambit. Part 3. Trust and Treachery. The Alliance held, for now. We were deep within the Syndicate-controlled sectors, a network of heavily fortified tunnels and repurposed factory complexes. The air grew heavier here, thick with the smell of recycled lubricants and the oppressive hum of automated defenses. Every shadow seemed to conceal a drone, every corner a hidden turret. The Syndicate didn't just control, they suffocated. Our combined efforts proved effective. Sorry, a silent whisper in the darkness, bypassed laser grids and pressure plates with an almost supernatural grace, her iridescent skin flickering, barely visible against the grimy walls. She moved like liquid shadow, mapping out patrol routes, marking targets for Kira. Kira, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of data manipulation. From a hidden alcove, her fingers flying across her portable console, she fed me real-time schematics of the Syndicate's internal network, highlighting blind spots and access codes. "They're running a primitive encryption for their sensor nets," she'd mutter, a faint smirk touching her lips. Amateurs. Her wit was as sharp as her intellect, a constant, wry commentary on our dangerous playground. Zora was the brute force, but wielded with surprising tactical awareness. Once a sensor grid was down, or a comms channel jammed by Kira, Zora would burst through, her slug thrower spitting fire, turning Syndicate enforcers into pulped meat. Her roars echoed through the tunnels, a terrifying symphony of destruction that sowed chaos and cleared our path. Her movements were brutally efficient, a whirlwind of raw power. I found myself instinctively covering her flanks, a silent acknowledgement of her lethal effectiveness. My role, the wild card, was to exploit the chaos they created. I moved ahead, slipping through newly opened breaches, bypassing now blinded turrets, ensuring our forward momentum. My multi-tool, usually a passive device, hummed constantly, slicing through weakened bulkheads, overriding security locks for mere seconds before they reset. My internal monologue was a constant stream of predictive analysis, anticipating enemy responses, calculating the optimal angle of attack, the perfect moment for a diversion. Another 5 clicks to the central data nexus, Kira's voice, calm and precise, crackled in my ear. "Their core defenses are tightening. Expect heavy resistance." "Good," Zora rumbled, a note of satisfaction in her tone. I was getting bored. Valeria's voice was sharp. "Maintain formation. No unnecessary engagements. We get in, we get the shard, we get out." Her authority was absolute, cutting through Zora's battle hunger with ease. We reached the central data nexus, a massive chamber dominated by a colossal, humming server rack. This was the brain of this Syndicate outpost. Our target, the Chrono Shard, was supposedly housed within a secure vault, integrated into this network. As we prepared for the final push, nestled behind a barricade of overturned containers, a subtle shift in the dynamic began. "You're surprisingly effective for a lone wolf," Kira commented, her eyes, usually focused on her console, now flicking to me. There was a genuine note of curiosity in her voice. "And you're surprisingly trusting for a Nomad queen," I retorted, a wry grin touching my lips. "Didn't take you for the alliance type?" She chuckled. "Necessity. And a good strategy. We respect competence, Spacer. Rare as it is in your kind." The implied insult was clear, yet delivered with a playful edge that was almost charming. "Sorry," observing from her shadowed perch, shifted slightly, her amber eyes meeting mine for a fleeting moment. A silent acknowledgement. A shared sense of the unpredictable thrill of the moment. I found myself drawn to her quiet competence, the way she moved with an almost primal connection to the environment. Zora, however, remained wary. "Don't get soft, Kira," she grunted, her gaze fixed on the Syndicate stronghold. "He's still a male. Still an outsider. He'll cut and run the first chance he gets." "She's not wrong," I admitted, my voice a low, cynical drawl. Self-preservation is a powerful motivator. I met Zora's challenging gaze, a subtle battle of wills playing out in our eyes. But sometimes, self-preservation means sticking with the devils you know. Valeria, her back to us, studying the schematics Kira projected onto a nearby wall, finally turned. Her jade eyes were cold, calculating. "We retrieve the shard. Our agreement extends only to our mutual survival against the Syndicate. Once the threat is neutralized, the shard belongs to us. No arguments. No sudden moves." "Naturally," I said, my smirk unwavering, even as my internal monologue began to formulate escape plans, contingency routes, and, yes, potential betrayal strategies. The prize was always the prize. But the game had evolved. The deeper we delved into the Syndicate stronghold, the more I learned about them, not just their skills, but their underlying motivations. Valeria's strategic brilliance wasn't just about winning. It was about freedom. Freedom from any authority, any system. Her eyes, when she spoke of the Syndicate's control, held a deep, simmering hatred. She was driven by an unyielding desire for absolute autonomy, for herself and for her sisters. Her allure was rooted in that fierce independence, that uncompromising will. Kira, the tech genius, was fascinated by ancient tech, by the hidden knowledge that powered the universe. Her intellect was a hunger, a relentless pursuit of understanding. She spoke in code, in data streams, but her passion was clear. She sought answers, and the Chrono Shard, a piece of temporal anomaly, was the ultimate puzzle. Her subtle charm lay in the sheer, captivating force of her mind. Sari, the quietist, was driven by a fierce, almost primal loyalty to the group. She was their protector, their silent guardian. Her past, I suspected, was one of harsh survival, of living in the shadows. She found solace and purpose in the unyielding bond with her sisters. Her allure was the enigma itself, the power and grace hidden beneath a veil of silence. Zora, the warrior, fought for the sheer joy of it, for the thrill of pushing her limits, of dominating her opponents. She was straightforward, brutally honest, and utterly without pretense. Her desire was for recognition, for the visceral triumph of strength. Her allure was in her raw, untamed power, a magnetic pull for the part of me that understood primal instinct. They were more than just rivals. They were complex individuals, each driven by a powerful internal compass, united by a bond one couldn't fully comprehend, but could certainly respect. The lines blurred. Adversaries, yes, but also a strange kind of kinship, forged in the crucible of shared peril. The competition for the prize was intensifying, but so was the unspoken tension between us. Who would betray whom first? Who would take the shot? The anticipation was a delicious ache, a dangerous dance on the edge of a knife. One night, as we rested in a hidden crevice, sharing ration packs, Kira casually mentioned, "The shard's temporal signature is unique. The Syndicate wants it to stabilize their jump gates. Supposedly, it eliminates the unpredictable fluctuations." She looked at me, a flicker of warning in her eyes. "But it can also be used to accelerate a timeline, or unravel one." My internal monologue hummed with new calculations. Accelerate a timeline. Unravel one. The Chrono Shard was far more dangerous than I had initially thought, and their knowledge of it was deeper than I'd assumed. This wasn't just a simple artifact. It was a key to immense power. Valeria, watching me, her jade eyes unblinking, added, "Power is a double-edged blade, human. It can cut both ways. We understand its dangers." "Do you?" I understand survival, I retorted, meeting her gaze evenly. And the best way to survive is to control the variables, to hold the ultimate leverage. My implied threat was clear. I wouldn't hesitate to use the shard if it came down to it. A subtle smirk touched Valeria's lips. Good. Then we understand each other. The stage was set. The prize was beyond valuable. The syndicate was a formidable obstacle, and my allies were as dangerous as any enemy. The ultimate gambit was about to begin. My life, my freedom, and perhaps the very fabric of Xylos Delta's future hung in the balance, a thrilling, perilous dance with dangerous equals. Hashtag the Nomad's Gambit. Part 4. The Core and the Crucible. The final push for the Chronos Shard. The Syndicate's central command hub loomed ahead, a fortress of hardened durasteel and humming energy fields. It was a brutalist monument to corporate control, cold and unforgiving. My internal monologue was a cascade of tactical probabilities, assessing every variable, every potential outcome. This wasn't just a heist, it was a raid, and our uneasy alliance was about to be tested to its breaking point. Their perimeter scans are cycling every 37 seconds. Kira's voice, sharp and focused, crackled in my ear. Sorry can slip through Sector Row 4. It's a tighter squeeze, but their pressure sensors are old tech. Should buy us a clean 20 seconds. 20 seconds, Sari's low voice confirmed, is enough. Her movements were already a silent blur in the shadows, her iridescent skin melting into the gloom. Zora, Valeria commanded, her voice calm, utterly in control. Once Sari is inside, you hit the eastern gate. Hard. Draw their attention. We need a breach, not a siege. Understood, Nomad Queen, Zora rumbled, a predatory gleam in her gray eyes. Her slug thrower, heavy and lethal, seemed to hum in anticipation. And you, Spacer, Valeria's voice was directed at me, a subtle challenge in her tone. Your wildcard status. What's your play for this grand finale? My smirk was grim. I'm the distraction, the ghost in their machine. Once Zora creates the breach, I go in, deeper, set off a few more internal alarms, draw their internal patrols away from the shard, create maximum chaos. Then I converge on your position. We secure the shard. Fast. Clean. My internal monologue added. And then the real game begins. A bold play, Valeria murmured, her gaze piercing, assessing my sincerity. Risky, but perhaps effective. There was a grudging respect in her tone, a shared appreciation for the calculated risk. Risk is how you get ahead in this galaxy, Nomad Queen. I countered, my voice laced with challenge. You should know that better than anyone. True enough, she conceded, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk touching her lips. Let's begin. The air crackled with tension, a shared breath held. Then, Sari vanished. A heartbeat later, Kira's voice, sensors down in row 4. Sari's in. Go. Valeria barked. Zora launched forward, a screaming whirlwind of muscle and fire. Her slug thrower roared, spitting molten lead, tearing through the eastern gate with terrifying efficiency. Alarms blared, a jarring cacophony that ripped through the relative silence of the stronghold. Syndicate enforcers, clad in their distinctive black armor, boiled out from every access point, their weapons spitting laser fire. The battle had begun. I moved, a shadow among shadows, slipping through a collapsed vent shaft opened by Kira's precise guidance. My multi-tool hummed, bypassing security panels, rerouting power conduits, triggering false alarms deep within the stronghold. The sounds of combat, Zora's roars, and the Syndicate's frantic shouts echoed from the distance. Chaos. Perfect. My internal monologue was a cold, efficient machine, processing data, calculating pathways, anticipating patrols. This was my element. The thrill of the chase, the high-stakes game of wits against formidable opponents, both friend and foe. He's deep inside. Kira's voice, a ghost in my ear, sounded almost impressed, drawing half their internal response units away from the vault. Nicely played, Spacer. Just doing my part, I retorted, ducking under a sweeping laser grid, rolling into a maintenance access tube. I eventually converged with Valeria and Kira near the vault, a massive, reinforced door humming with internal energy. Sari had already disabled its outer layers, her silent work leaving behind a series of delicate, bypass circuits. Impressive, I conceded, a genuine note of admiration in my voice. You're faster than I anticipated. You're not so slow yourself, human, Kira replied, a subtle smirk touching her lips as she worked on the final security console, her fingers a blur. For a single unit combatant. Just as Kira's console beeped with a triumphant tone and the vault door began its slow, ponderous hiss of retraction, a squad of Syndicate heavy enforcers rounded the corner, their massive armored forms bristling with weapons. They were elite, built for direct confrontation, their plasma cannons already charging. Trouble, Valeria stated, her hand instinctively going to the blaster at her hip. My kind of trouble, Zora's voice boomed over the comms, and she burst into the chamber, a whirlwind of furious energy, her slug thrower tearing into the Syndicate ranks. She was a diversion, a shield, buying us precious seconds. The chamber erupted into a furious firefight. Lasers crisscrossed, plasma bolts exploded against the reinforced walls, and the roar of Zora's slug thrower was a constant, brutal symphony. The shard, Valeria barked, her eyes fixed on the slowly opening vault. Get it? I rushed forward, past Kira, past the firefight, towards the vault. Inside, on a pedestal of pure light, the Chronos shard pulsed with an intensified, ethereal glow, its temporal hum almost audible. It was larger than I remembered, or perhaps the energy it radiated simply made it feel larger. My hand reached out, brushing against the shimmering artifact. It was cold, ancient, yet vibrated with immense power. This was it, the prize. Just as my fingers closed around the shard, a Syndicate enforcer, bypassing Zora's assault, lunged at me, his plasma blade igniting with a lethal hum. I saw it too late. My reaction time, dulled by the focus on the shard, was off. But then, a flash of iridescent blue. Sorry. She appeared out of nowhere, a silent blur, her vibro knife slicing through the enforcer's arm with surgical precision. The enforcer screamed, dropping his weapon, clutching his severed limb. Sari simply melted back into the shadows, a ghost of lethal efficiency. No words. No acknowledgement. Just a decisive, life-saving intervention. My internal monologue reeled. She saved me, not for alliance, not for sentiment, for the mission, for the prize, for their collective success. The lines between adversary and ally blurred completely. I turned back to the shard, gripping it tightly. Its cold power pulsed in my hand. This was the moment. I could bolt, take it and run, leave them to deal with the Syndicate. My cynicism urged me on, but I looked back at the chaos. Zora was a storm of fury, holding the line against impossible odds. Kira was actively hacking the Syndicate's internal comms, broadcasting false alarms, diverting reinforcements, her fingers a blur on her console. Valeria, calm and deadly, was directing their movements, her blaster spitting precise shots, her strategic mind calculating every variable. They were a unit, a terrifying, beautiful unit. And I was part of it. This grudging respect, this dangerous stance, had forged something. The shard is secure. I yelled over the din of battle, the words oddly meaningful, a declaration of intent. Good. Valeria's voice was sharp. Now, extract. We've breached our window. The battle was raging, and the Syndicate reinforcements were adapting, their tactics shifting. We needed to go. Just as I turned to follow Valeria, a colossal explosion ripped through the far end of the chamber. The outer walls buckled, Durasteel groaning under immense pressure. The ground shuddered violently. Not Syndicate tech. This was something else. Something far more primal. Environmental shift. Kira shrieked, her voice laced with genuine alarm. The planet's unstable. Another landmass displacement. We're trapped. A massive section of the ceiling groaned, then began to crumble, sending tons of twisted metal and rock raining down, sealing our primary escape route. The entire stronghold was tearing itself apart. Damn it. Valeria cursed, her face grim. New plan. We find an emergency evac tunnel. Now. The climax had arrived, not by our design, but by the capricious will of Xylos Delta. And our precarious alliance was about to face its ultimate test. The prize, the Chronos shard, suddenly felt insignificant in the face of oblivion. Hashtag the Nomad's Gambit. Part 5. The Reckoning in the Aftermath. The collapsing stronghold became a death trap. Dust and debris rained down, choking the air. The ground shuddered with terrifying regularity, and the groan of tortured metal was a constant, deafening lament. Syndicate enforcers, now as terrified as we were, scattered, their discipline shattered by the sheer, overwhelming force of the planet's upheaval. "This way," Kira yelled, her voice strained, her comms crackling. Her face was streaked with grime, but her eyes, usually so calm, held a frantic energy as she punched commands into her console. "There's a geological survey tunnel. Older tech, might be unstable, but it's our only viable path out of this sector. Lead the way." Valeria barked, her blaster spitting fire at a crumbling support pillar that threatened to crush us. Zora, her slug thrower empty, grabbed a fallen pipe and used it as a crude bludgeon, clearing a path through the debris. Sorry, a silent blur, was already ahead, her form melting into the unstable shadows of the tunnel entrance. I ran with them, the chrono shard clutched tightly in my hand. Its cold power pulsed, a strange counterpoint to the raw fear and adrenaline coursing through me. The lines between adversary and ally had vanished entirely. We were simply survivors. The geological tunnel was a nightmarish crawl. The air was thin and metallic, punctuated by the agonizing groans of the planet. Walls pulsed with an unnerving, organic light, and the ground shifted constantly beneath our feet, threatening to swallow us whole. My body, already battered, screamed with every movement. "The tunnel is collapsing behind us." Sari's voice, usually so quiet, was sharp with urgency. "We're almost clear." Kira yelled back, her breath ragged. "Another 50 meters. There's a surface access point." Just as a section of the ceiling collapsed directly ahead, blocking our path, Valeria, without a moment's hesitation, hurled a plasma grenade from her belt. The explosion was deafening, tearing through the unstable rock, clearing a narrow, smoking passage. She was a true leader, decisive and utterly fearless. We scrambled through the smoking gap, emerging into a small, open cavern. Above us, a faint glimmer of moonlight filtered through a crack in the planet's surface. Freedom was agonizingly close. But then, a new threat. As we pushed towards the surface crack, 3 Syndicate heavy enforcers, somehow having survived the collapse and anticipated our escape route, emerged from a side tunnel, their plasma cannons charging. They were battered, their armor scorched, but their eyes held a desperate, lethal intent. They wanted that shard. The shard, one of them roared, his voice distorted by his helmet's comms. "Get them." Zora bellowed, grabbing a loose rebar from the ground, launching herself at the nearest enforcer. She was a whirlwind of raw, untamed fury, her movements brutal and effective. Valeria and Kira joined the fray, their blasters spitting precise bolts of energy. Sari was already a phantom, moving behind the remaining enforcers, her vibroknife a silent, lethal whisper. I stood there for a split second, the chrono shard heavy in my hand, the escape route beckoning. This was my chance. I could slip away in the chaos. Let them deal with the Syndicate. My cynical rogue instinct screamed, "Take it and run. You owe them nothing." But I looked at them. Valeria, her face grim with determination, fighting with calculated ferocity. Kira, providing covering fire, her eyes tracking every movement, her mind undoubtedly calculating odds. Zora, a primal force, battling with sheer, unyielding power. Sari, a silent, deadly shadow, protecting our flank. They were rivals. They were dangerous. They had tried to kill me, and I them. But we had survived together. We had fought side by side. And in this hellish environment, that meant something. My hand instinctively went to my last sonic grenade. My multi-tool word, activating a wideband EMP. "Heads up, Queens," I yelled, tossing the sonic grenade directly at the charging Syndicate enforcers. The blast was deafening, disorienting the Syndicate. The EMP followed, sparking, shutting down their plasma cannons and helmets. They stumbled, blinded, confused. Valeria glanced at me, a flicker of surprise in her jade eyes, quickly replaced by a subtle, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. Kira gave me a sharp, appreciative smirk. Zora, momentarily distracted by my intervention, grunted in approval, then charged, capitalizing on the disarray. We fought as a unit, a symphony of coordinated chaos. My blaster spat precise shots, picking off the disoriented Syndicate soldiers. Within minutes, the threat was neutralized. That was unexpected, Spacer, Valeria said, her voice a little softer, a little less formal, as she holstered her blaster. Consider it a down payment, I replied, a wry grin touching my lips. For future endeavors. Or perhaps, just a show of mutual respect. Kira chuckled, a genuine, unburdened sound. Respect from a lone wolf? That's high praise. Sorry, ever silent, emerged from the shadows, her vibro knife clean. She glanced at me, her amber eyes holding a flicker of something new. Not curiosity, but something closer to acceptance. We reached the surface access point, a narrow fissure that widened into a gaping maw. The air outside was cold, thin, but gloriously clean. The binary suns were sinking below the horizon, casting the planet in long, purplish shadows. We stood there, at the precipice of escape, the Chronos shard glowing faintly in my hand. The moment of truth. The underlying rivalry, the prize, still hung in the air. So, Valeria said, her gaze fixing on the shard, then on me. Her voice was calm, but held an unspoken challenge. The prize. Your gambit paid off. What now, Spacer? I looked at the Chronos shard, its temporal hum a soft pulse in my palm. Power. Immense power. The ultimate leverage. My ticket to anything. Then I looked at the Nomad queens. Valeria, the strategist, her gaze sharp, unwavering. Kira, the intellect, her eyes bright with a hungry curiosity. Sorry, the silent hunter, her presence a promise of loyalty and lethal grace. Zora, the warrior, her face still flushed with the thrill of battle. They were dangerous. They were challenging. They were equals dash. And the game with them was infinitely more exhilarating than any prize. My cynical heart, long accustomed to solitude and self-preservation, made a choice. Not for sentiment, but for strategy. And for the sheer, intoxicating thrill of it all. The shard, I said, holding it out to Valeria, is a liability. Too much heat. Too much attention. It would only draw more Syndicate dogs. I met her gaze, a subtle challenge in my eyes. But it is also leverage. For future endeavors. Valeria's eyes narrowed, studying me. What do you propose? A partnership, I said, the words feeling strange, yet undeniably right. Temporary, informal. You need intel on Syndicate movements. I need resources, a way off this rock, and a good challenge. The shard, I gestured with it, can be split. Not its power, no. That's too dangerous. But its value. We both get a share. A token of our mutual respect. And a promise of future games. A long silence. The wind howled around us. You trust us, human? Zora finally grunted, a note of genuine surprise in her voice. No, I replied, a smirk touching my lips. Not entirely. But I respect your competence. And I've learned that sometimes, the most dangerous allies are the most effective. Besides, I met Valeria's gaze, a subtle challenge in my eyes. The hunt is always better when you're not entirely sure who's the predator and who's the prey. Isn't it, Nomad Queen? Valeria's lips curved into a faint, predatory smile. Indeed, Spacer. Indeed. Kira chuckled. A fascinating proposition. Sorry, a subtle nod. The deal was struck, not with formal agreements, but with a shared glance, a mutual understanding. The Chronos shard was divided, its immense value now dispersed, its immediate danger lessened. We dispersed, each taking a different path into the vast, indifferent landscape of Xylos Delta. My Stardust Drifter waited, still hidden in its magnetic shadow. I was free. I had the means to leave this rock. But my mind was no longer solely focused on cynical survival. The universe felt larger, more thrilling, filled with new possibilities. The memory of the Nomad Queens, their sharp intellect, their lethal efficiency, their dangerous charm, was a constant, alluring presence. They were rivals, yes, but also something more. A new kind of game had begun, one without end, a thrilling dance between dangerous equals. The lines between adversary and ally had blurred, not just on Xylos Delta, but within the very fabric of my adventurous, restless soul. And I knew, with a certainty that was both exhilarating and terrifying, that our paths would cross again. The galaxy was vast, but for predators like us, it was also surprisingly small.